How to pick the winners. In one of our last episodes, we spoke about the degrees of freedom that we enjoy as hedge fund managers, and our conclusion was that there's only one degree of freedom we actually enjoy, and that is the what. What do we actually invest in? This is the topic of today. It started at the beginning with Samuel Adams' Boston Lager when there was no known demand for a full flavored American craft beer. In 1984, starting a beer company in America was akin to starting a car company. There were the big three, and it seemed impossible to compete with them. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's June 18th, 2020. I'm Krim Delko. And before I go into the topic of how to pick the winners in disruptive technologies, let's give a quick update. So since June 16th, our last update, we are up 3%. The S&P is flat. For the year, we are up 69%. The S&P is down 3%. So we outperformed by 72%. Tesla contributed about 2.5%, and the CRISPR index 0.5%. Just two news items that caught our attention. Tesla's registrations for May, April and May in 26 states came in pretty well. Not great, but given the COVID crisis, they were still pretty decent. And I think the market is starting to price a decent number for this quarter, even though this is going to be a terrible quarter because 7 weeks they didn't even produce cars, etc. I don't want to go into details there, but it looks like the situation on the demand front is not terrible. It's definitely much better than the rest of the car market. The CRISPR index also had some positive data, which came out of some tests, blood disease therapies that could potentially have solutions with gene editing, and that is one of the vectors that the CRISPR companies are pursuing. But now let's get to our main topic of today: how to pick the winners, how to find clues about the technologically driven disruption and the companies that will benefit from this development and produce the outsized returns that we're looking for as fund managers. And I started with a couple of quotes from the last annual report of Boston Beer, which is the owner of Samuel Adams. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to give an example of a beer company to show that disruption, technologically driven disruption, doesn't necessarily have to be in Silicon Valley and high tech. But Sam Adams, very much like Tesla, Amazon, Google, and Raytheon in 1920, and Standard Oil and Walt Disney, and all these companies that created large markets, all have a couple of things in common, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now let's get back to the fundamentals of disruption and why these two quotes that I gave. One was that there was no demand for full flavored craft beer, and the other was that there were three large companies in 1984 when Boston Beer was founded, and it was impossible to compete with them. Those are two important details. And why is the Boston Beer management putting that in their annual report? I think they want to make it clear that they were a very typical disruptor. Because disruption, according to Clayton Christensen, is the theory of competitive response. Very much like evolutionary biology, the theory of disruption is a descriptive theory. It doesn't help us predict what's going to happen, but it helps us explain very well what happened. And that's very useful. But still, as investors, we would like to be able to predict stuff. And I think Clayton Christensen gave us a little bit more because he at least helps us predict how competitors will react to a particular company. And that is super valuable. And this is the first thing that we look at as investors. When we are interested in a company, when we have the belief that some of the ingredients of technologically driven disruptions are given, the first thing we're going to look at is what's competition going to do? Because let me tell you one thing. The one thing that kills your returns is competition. So you don't want to have competition in anything that your companies are doing. And Boston Beer, according to their own annual report, was facing three giants dominating the beer market, Bud, Miller, and Coors in 1984. However, they also were creating a new market that those giants did not care about. And this is the key of Christensen's theory. It is that the large incumbents, by their own managerial processes, it's not because they're stupid, but because that's the way they're run, by definition will not care about a market that doesn't exist. They will protect their existing market, but they will not go after a market that doesn't exist yet. When Amazon started, online commerce was not a concern in the Walmart board because it wasn't a market. What Walmart was very much concerned about is retail, but not online retail because it didn't exist. And that was the beginning of Amazon. And that was a huge clue for anybody who was investing in Jeff Bezos. You are creating a gigantic market, but the market is new and the existing incumbents will not bother you. When Tesla started luxury electric cars, when they brought luxury electric cars to market, the large incumbents didn't care. Daimler was even an owner of Tesla, 12.5%. They owned 12.5% of the equity, and they sold the equity after the Model S was launched because they didn't believe that the market for luxury electric vehicles is that large. So this is an important message here that we hammer into our own brains every day. Competition is key, but to make money, you don't want to have competition. And the best legal way not to have competition is to create a new market. And that's what disruptors do. Now, of course, it takes a little bit more than that. It takes technology. And I want to get back to another episode that we had when I spoke about Neil Shubin and his book, Some Assembly Required. He talks about the fact that when the big transitions happened in evolution, for example, when animals went from water on land, those transitions don't just happen. It's not like we evolve limbs and lungs and all that stuff in real time. He says that a lot of these innovations were already there in the animals, and the ones that were able to make the transition out to land, they were repurposing those innovations for their own use. The analogy in business would be, I think, a very nice one is Amazon. Jeff Bezos did not build the internet. He did not invent distributed computing. He did not build the highway system. He did not invent airplanes. But he used all of these things, the terrestrial logistics networks. He used the internet, and he used distributed computing and created Amazon on top of these innovations. Elon Musk did not invent electric motors, nor did he invent the lithium-ion battery, but he repurposed them to build a luxury electric cars. There's a lot of other innovation that has to happen, but those are this is another key ingredient. Let me give you a less high-tech example. Sam Adams, according to a couple of records from them and other people in the craft beer industry, one of the biggest innovations in craft beer was actually, or one that propelled the growth, was social media. Why? Because social media helped market craft beer in local markets and therefore circumvent this unbelievable wall of marketing that the big beer companies were throwing at the market. So you were able to, with low budgets, penetrate local markets, one town at a time, one bar at a time, one door at a time, and grow your brand. And that's also, not surprisingly, the craft beer market really took off in sort of, after 2000 when social media started picking up. Before that, it was a very niche industry. What I'm trying to say here is that you have technologically driven disruption in many different places in the marketplace, in the economy, and as investors, you want to look for these clues. You want to see that there are particular industries prone for disruption because there is technology, there's new technology, new innovations are there. And then you also want to make sure that there's no competition, that those markets that they're playing in are new, hopefully, that there's no demand yet for that stuff that they're doing. There was, according to Boston Beer, there was no demand for flavored beer in America. There was no demand for luxury electric cars when Tesla came to the scene. And there was no demand for online commerce in the mid-90s when Amazon came to the scene. Here's the last ingredient you need for a successful outsized returner. It's the winner's mentality. And this is a topic on its own. I don't want to go too deep into this now because this is really a long topic. But just to be clear, you can have the best technologies, you can have a market waiting for you. If you don't have the winner's mentality, and the winner's mentality is something that it's a combination of very strong ego. It's the kind of person that stands on the mat and goes to win the fight. That kind of mentality, this is something I really have to elaborate much more because it's very dear to my heart. I'm a practitioner of martial arts. So I come from a place of, I am willing to fight and I'm going to win the fight. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to win that fight. And this is the winner's mentality. There are ways to do that by using techniques. In martial arts, you use jiu-jitsu, you use striking techniques. In business, you develop technologies, innovations, concepts, marketing ideas. There's also ways to win fights without the fight. This is very dear to my heart. This is Bruce Lee, the founding father of modern martial arts. He wants to win the fight without the fight. Again, this is a whole topic on its own. I just want to emphasize the winner mentality. You need to have that, and typically you find that in founders. And that's why in companies that we invest in, we want to have either a founder or a founder mentality or both within the company. It doesn't have to be the CEO on the chair. It can be a culture that is in the company, maybe because the founder put it there, and maybe the founder is not around anymore. It doesn't necessarily have to be a founder, but it's ideally it is the founder, the winner mentality. It is the creation of new markets by repurposing existing technologies for the purpose to win in that new market. Those are the ingredients that I think make a very high probability of having an outsized winner in your portfolio. Thank you.